This next presenter, Sherry Latten, is going to be presenting for us a new topic, which is...
Oh, you can hear me. Hello, everyone. It's influential leadership for project managers.
All right, so interesting topic. Sherry, you have the mic.
All right. Thanks so much, Lou. I appreciate it. All right, we'll get started. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Latten. Again, it's great to meet you. Hello, like the waves. That makes me feel comfortable, too. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my background, and then we're just going to jump right in. I loved hearing the panel and all the conversation about certifications and how we have to continue evolving, because I feel like they were telling my story. When I got out of undergrad, which was finance and economics, I went right into banking. I was in the banking industry for about 15 years. In that process, definitely had some of the accidental project management roles. And I thought, I really like this. Like, this tracks with the way I think. I think I may have been born a project manager. Like, it was just who I was, right? It felt very natural to me. From there, I continued on in various leadership roles, project managing and leading teams, designing training, did a lot of different internal consulting kind of roles in the bank, which is, by the way, now Wells Fargo. I was pre-Wells Fargo, but loved it, and then decided, I think I want to get some certifications in this project management stuff. I don't know what it is, but I think there's probably more I can learn, right? So moved forward, got my PMP certification, and I thought, wow, I really like this. Started applying some of those tools to what I was doing in the workplace. It was one of those things where I thought, I don't have to use all the tools that I learned. I just need to know which ones to use at the right time, right? So love that. Decided, if I can pass the PMP and I kind of like the studying thing, then I think I'll continue on. So when I went ahead and got my master's in organization development and change, what prompted me to get my master's in that was I realized that a lot of the projects I was leading were occurring because there was some change happening in the organization. So I was reading a lot of books, reading a lot of journals, trying to understand what prompted change, how do you make change last. So I thought, this could be an interesting combination of project management and org development and change. So I started blending the two. About that time, I was getting ready to have my third child, who they are all now grown. And I thought, I really like this. I think I'd like to do it on my own. So I left banking, started my own consulting practice. And I was doing a blend. It was training design, project management, and organization development and change. That felt very normal to me. I did not realize that it was typically pretty rare to have a person who could do that. That was typically like multiple roles. But somehow I'd taken all of those tools, blended them together, and just loved what I was doing. Decided to continue going. I got my doctorate in leadership with a focus on conflict resolution. So in all of that, I've tried to figure out what is it that is my differentiator, right? When a client reaches out to me and I'm leading a project, helping them with some kind of change initiative, what is it that they call me to lead a project? And what I realized, without me naming it at first, it was my ability to be an influential leader no matter what space I was in. So it was like, now this is interesting. So what I've done for you today is try to unpack what does that look like when I'm working with someone. And I think it's important and relevant to all of us in the room, because when I look at the future of project management, we have to understand our differentiator, right? We have to know, okay, well, if AI can prepare the meeting summary, that's not my differentiator. If AI can help build a project plan for me in some ways and do some of that administrative piece, that's not my differentiator. So what is it? Maybe, just maybe, the lens that we offer as project managers is so unique that we can actually be influential leaders. So that's what we're going to talk about. So 5 different ways that I see us showing up as influential leaders. This very first one, recognizing your unique role. Think about a project manager and where we sit, right? We have the ability to watch. We pay attention. We're very detailed oriented, but we also have to understand the vision and the strategy. We have to see both at the same time so we can help an organization or a team get there, right? So here we are in these spaces where we can see what's happening at the individual level, what's happening at a project level, what may be happening with the team, or happening with an entire organization, depending on the size. We need to capitalize on that role, right? It's a very unique place that we sit. If you think about anyone else on a project, they're not seeing it through the same lens that we are. I'll give you a good example. I do a lot of projects around sustainability reports, one of those requirements that's coming into play for a lot of organizations now. And initially, my project management role of sustainability reports was kind of isolated, like they were producing this report for this company. Then they started realizing there are a lot of other voluntary reports happening that we are responsible for, and I started being asked to lead some of those projects. As that was occurring, I was seeing overlaps. I was seeing some of the same people showing up. I was seeing some of the same concerns showing up from a sustainability perspective. But remember, I was the project manager, so there weren't shared perspectives happening in the organization. I had that unique seat, right? And so I was able to then bring some of that uniqueness into those conversations. So whether I was in a sustainability report conversation or an annual report conversation, I could say, you know, the customer story that they're bringing up in the sustainability report is this. Is that complementing what you're trying to do in the annual report story? And they would go, huh. I'm like, I don't know. Here's someone that I've been working with in this group in your organization. I wonder if the two of you might have a conversation and that might help. And they would go, that's amazing. That is like ingenious. And I'm like, I'm just watching. I'm watching, right? So think about your role as a project manager. Very unique, very unique. We have a lot of opportunity to leverage that. The next one, use the power of listening and observation. I'm a really good listener. I pay attention to a lot of details. Probably makes people nervous sometimes. Here's why I say use that power of listening and observation. It's not just, did someone follow through on a task? Or did I hear what they said was important to create a milestone for them and to envision it in a certain way? It's, am I paying attention to the dynamics of a group? Am I paying attention to who's talking, who's not talking, who's expressing a need in a way that no one else seems to be noticing in the room, right? Am I hearing a concern coming from a group, but another group isn't paying attention to it? See, I listen, I watch. I pay attention to how people show up in a meeting. I pay attention to what they say and what they don't say, right? I'm watching all of it. So it's a little bit different from, am I just tracking completion of tasks? Am I doing risk mitigation? I'm paying attention to the dynamics of the people, and therefore I create value for that team because when I'm facilitating meetings, I can then tease out things based on what I've noticed or what I've not noticed, right? So that power of listening and observation becomes important because it allows you to show value for the people involved in the project, right? People want to know that you care about them. We're not, robots just here to get a task done to say that we accomplished this. People want to know that we're paying attention to who they are, right? I had a project manager I was working with a few weeks ago. We were working together on this collaborative timeline. And what that team had put forward compared to what I knew we needed, they were several weeks apart, which in the scheme of a publication was a pretty big deal. It wasn't like a couple of days, it was a few weeks apart. And we're talking through this project plan, and I'm listening to what they need and what kind of support they need, and I'm validating what their needs are. I'm not saying that we can meet all of those, but I'm listening to it, I'm hearing it, right? At the end of the meeting, she said, I've just got to let you know, coming to our meetings is the highlight of my week. Wow, this is a one-on-one I was having with someone, right? If I can have her feel heard in a meeting that we were not walking out with this on the same page with what a timeline was going to look like. We were going to have to change it. I was going to need them to deliver faster. And she can walk out and say, meeting with me was a highlight of her week. That means I'm listening well. That means I'm validating who she is as a person, right? Because guess what? If she can feel that way when we're in a larger group meeting and I need a little give and take, she's probably going to be far more apt to work with me to help us achieve our goal, right? So the power of listening and observing. The next one is communicating with intention. This is one of my favorites. As project managers, if you think about how often we communicate to a project team, right? We're communicating deadlines, we are creating agendas, we're facilitating the meetings, we're walking through the timelines, we're doing all of these things, right? We communicate a lot. We have a choice on how we're going to use our communication. We can be very tactical. That would accomplish the goal, right? Very tactical. Or we could realize that, wow, we have an ability to be influential leaders. We can affirm people, we can encourage people, we can motivate people, right? Just by nature of showing gratitude in a meeting for someone having done what we needed them to do, yeah, it's their job, but a simple thank you. Appreciate you doing that. That was awesome. Glad you were able to knock that out last week. I can communicate the same thing by just going, great, we complete that, that's done. Or I can actually help create a community within that project team that they want to be a part of that project team, right? It's because I'm choosing to communicate with intention. I'm intentional about how I create agendas. You could look at agendas a couple of different ways when you're running a project. You could always prioritize. There are things you have to put first, right? Because if you go, ugh, we're going to run out of time, you don't get to certain topics. You have to have the meeting, have it set up so it flows, so you get to the most important first. However, what I'm also paying attention to is the dynamics of the team. I know that if we start the conversation here, it's going to be a toxic conversation. It is not going to go well, and we are not going to get through everything because people are going to get stuck. I know if I start off with this topic, people are going to be creative. They're going to be open to it. We're probably going to knock those first three items off really fast, and we'll get to the things that are a little bit more challenging, but I would have eased them into the conversation differently. See, it's a whole different thing beyond just the tactics of the project. It's paying attention to how do I communicate. That's whether I'm sending an instant message on Teams, or I'm sending an email follow-up, or I'm creating an agenda. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have had teams come to me and say, I love coming to your meetings. Yes, they are highly efficient, and I end them on time. And people know that, but they appreciate it because I let them know that's important to me. I'm like, I respect your time. I value your time, so I'm going to make sure we wrap up on time. And if we need to go a little bit longer for something, then we're going to have a conversation about that, and we're going to agree to that. I'm not going to disregard the clock and just keep going and just assume it's disrespectful to me, right? So I convey those kinds of things. So when I am communicating with the project team, I describe it as they get all of who I am as a person. They get hopefully the essence of my character. They walk away knowing they are valued in my eyes, and I view their role in that project as important, right? Every single person, does not matter what the role is, all of them. I've talked to the CEO, I talked to the admin, does not matter to me. You're all valued, that's why we're here on this project. And people feel that, right? So communicate with intention. That's why when you need to, when you're trying to, you're not trying to persuade people, you're trying to motivate them to take action to complete a project, right? If you've established that kind of relationship with people, then they follow up on things for you because they trust you, right? They trust that my intentions are good and my communications support that. I try very diligently to not be too quick in my communication that it could be misinterpreted as abrupt. And if there's something that's showing up in a communication, and even if I see a reaction, like people know if we're on Zoom together and I'm watching the faces and I see someone's reaction go, huh, I don't disregard it. I'm like, hey, Katie, you look a little, don't know how to read it. I'm just going to call it, right? guess what? Katie will typically tell me what's happening. And when we walk away from that, she is typically in a better space. May not have had anything to do with what I just said. I actually had a client a few weeks ago that we opened up the meeting. He had this very frustrated look on his face. And I said, hey, you're just looking kind of, I don't know, frustrated? He was like, my car was stolen. But see, I could have interpreted that. I could have ignored it, which is what a lot of people do. You watch the reaction and you're like, I don't think I'm going to say anything about that. That's going to get me off agenda, and I may not get through everything. So they ignore it, or it's uncomfortable. But by me opening up and asking, just check it in because of what I saw happening in his facial expression, guess what? He trusts me more. He trusts me more because he knows I'm paying attention, right? So communicate with intention. Inspire collective learning. So every time I go into a project, I'm like, look, I help build a lot of standard work. So some projects that I help manage for companies, they're repeat projects. It's an annual project. It's that time of year again, we're kicking it off. Every year I say the same thing. Anything we can do to improve this process, this experience for the group, anything you have learned from another project, bring it on. Let's make this thing better every single year. If you've worked with another group over this past year and we haven't spent time together and you see something that can help, please bring it, right? By me setting that stage early, it demonstrates that I'm open to learning, and it also conveys to them that I'm also going to be bringing learnings. And it's important, right? Because same thing, if you are going to have people trust you as a leader, if they're going to allow themselves to be affected or impacted by you, they've got to trust you, and they've got to know that you're in it for them, not just you. As a consultant, I see a lot of consultants that are just in it for themselves. They do what's necessary to get the next contract, so they hold on to some information, right? They hold on to the knowledge. I'm like, I'm going to give it away. I'm going to give it away, and I'm going to trust that I'll get the next contract because they know I'm willing to give it away. They know I'm willing to help them learn and grow. I work with clients. I don't ever give up proprietary information, but if there is a way of thinking about something that will help the different groups, even in the same company, then I'm happily sharing it. I was working with one group, and we were creating a training program. They'd not done a lot of measurement that really showed anything beyond like the number of attendees. It was kind of a level 1 evaluation, kind of a reaction. Did you like the training? That kind of thing. What they were trying to do, and to maintain funding for it, they really needed to ramp up that kind of evaluation. And so in that, did I need to bring to them the fact that I've actually helped to execute on other evaluations that are far more in depth and actually measure behavior change? I didn't have to, because it wasn't why they had hired me into that consulting opportunity, right? I was supposed to be project managing. I was supposed to be helping with some other pieces. But this inspiring collective learning, I said, you know what? Let me share with you a little bit about what I've helped some other organizations do, and even in your own company, a group that's doing that. You want me to connect you all? I'm sure they'd be happy to share with you their evaluation strategy, right? Think about that leader. Next time something comes up, that leader is going to trust me to share things. They know I'm not hoarding knowledge, on them. I'm just not hoarding it, right? So, collective learning. And then that final one, be a trusted partner. So when I think about the groups that I work with, I want them to trust that I am in this for their good. And I am. I genuinely am. I want them to succeed. I want the individuals, I want the team, I want the organization to thrive. They experience it in me because they know I'm willing to be open with them in dialogue. I'm not going to make an observation and just dismiss it. Right? They're comfortable having conversations in front of me that they probably would not be comfortable in other settings. If I see something that I think might work, like I see, maybe it's a project and I'm watching some resources, some people on the team really struggle Could be a capability perspective, could be a resource, capacity perspective, whatever that is. The leaders that I interact with know that I'll let them know that. Hey, I'm a little concerned, that maybe we've got too much. Do you know anything about how much they have on their plate? Like, I'm just noticing that they seem to be getting a little more behind than usual. I'm not used to seeing that in that person. Are they okay? Right? And when you approach it in that sincere way, and then in that authentic way, then they know that you have a vested interest in success, right? And that's the differentiator, right? So it's not about just, we have to be really good project managers. We have to put together really good milestones and track and hold people accountable. A lot of us can do that, but this sets you apart. Sets you apart. All right, so one of the things Lee said this morning to us, he said, don't just come to these sessions and take it all in. I want to make sure you take it back and do something with it, right? So we're going to start that now, okay? All right, I'm going to have you get in groups of 3. And in your groups of 3, I want you to take about 12 minutes, look through these 5. I'm sure as I was going through these, there were different ones that were popping up for you that you're like, I've done that before. Hadn't really named it that, but I've done that. So in your groups of 3, each person go around. I want you to share a time that you did this. And what was the impact? Could you tell at that moment that you were having influential leadership? Could you tell that you're like, this was a little more than the project management piece. Like they're starting to trust me in a different kind of way. So think of your one example, and in your group of 3, share that. And you'll have about 12 minutes for that. All right, questions? All right, enjoy those conversations. And we will do some pop-outs afterwards, by the way. All right, so each person in the group is sharing a time that you did one of these, and what is the impact? What was the impact that you had? All right, we've got about 2 minutes left. Is that enough time for everyone? Yeah, head nods, we're good. 2 more minutes, okay. All right, everybody ready to debrief that a little bit? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, I think we're good on time, so we're actually going to go around to each group and would just love to hear a couple of reflections, like, because you were really thinking about influential leadership. First, did everybody recognize that, yes, you are doing some influential leadership? Show of hands. Yeah, everybody doing influential leadership? Yeah? Okay, good, good. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started over here with this group and just some reflections coming out of your group.
I thought you were joking. It's hard. Okay, so my group, I'm Curtis, by the way. Hello, everyone. Our group, we focused on recognizing our unique roles. Myself, for example, I am in a unique position because I work in the construction industry. I came in for one specific role. I guess I better stand up. And then I ended up doing something totally different because I got my PMP, and then they started recognizing the values that I brought to the team. A bunch of blue-collar guys that are really great at building, but project management and communication were areas that they were kind of weak in, and I've been able to join the team and help strengthen out that aspect of the company. We also talked about, am I just doing for everybody? Or? Okay.
I'll take it on. So we also talked, I think all 3 of us kind of touched on this, is working in silos and working to break down those barriers. I think all 3 of us kind of mentioned that a couple of times. And personally for me, I've never worked in a job where I wasn't responsible in some way for talking to other internal partners and talking to external partners and working with various different groups and bringing people to the table. So, Lou, do you want this or should I pass it on?
So my unique role is being a board of director member and managing all of the video content that everybody receives on a monthly basis, right? So that's my unique role. I trust my team because everyone has a learning curve, right? We started out slow, but we gained momentum, and now we have a more effective and efficient team. And it all starts with trusting your people.
Beautiful.
So we'll hand it off to the next
Yeah,
group.
Round of applause for group one. Very nice. I love the reflections on the unique role. And that's what we have to tune into, right? What is the unique piece that we contribute to a team? Yep, group two.
So I guess I'm going to speak for my whole team, and I am in the presence of two trusted partners. So they took that to mean, if they are given a task, they can come back and be like, okay, I know you asked for this, but this is a better way to do that, and kind of creating that trust of like, okay, you give me the objective, but I'm going to make it better. I'm going to give my own expertise to that. And it can even mean, if you do this whole entire project and then the client doesn't end up liking it, it's going in with a positive attitude and be like, okay, what did we do right? What could we learn from that? We don't need to bring people down when they're down. We need to bring them up and kind of focus on that, because there's always going to be things to fix, but how do you be trusted for the next project? And then me, I was a unique role. So in any role that I've had, project management has always just kind of snuck in for me. And through that, I've been able to kind of gather the support of my colleagues and of my directors and kind of show the power of optimizing and how to make things better. So that's always been my unique role.
Nice job, beautifully done. I love, there was a little bit of, did you hear that, like, you have someone that you're working with and you need to offer up a different solution maybe, or a different idea from what they originally thought? It takes some courage, right? It takes some courage. When you think about influencing, it takes courage to do that. It's easy to go, that's what they asked for. I don't really think it's the best way to do it, but I'm going to go with it, right? So courageous leadership is involved in being an influential leader. Yeah, well done. All right, group three.
Well, we pretty much went through all five of them. We talked about our unique roles and some positions we had where we were influential. And my example, I was on a project with just myself and a business analyst, and so I had to bring that person up to speed and explain what the project was and direct them towards our end result. And then some of the other things we talked about was communication and just being direct, and how we typically communicate via email when you don't know how the communication is going to be accepted or received by the individual, but you have to express what you need done and just ask and request it.
All right, nice job. I love that focus on the communication piece. And you're right, we can't control how someone receives our communication, right? But we can at least be intentional, considerate, and thoughtful about making every step we can, take every measure we can to try to make it be received well. And then the rest of it's on the other person. But yeah, nice job. Thank you, group three. All right, group four.
Hi. We talked a lot about all five, just in how each one of those leadership skills play into our roles. I think I am in a unique situation where I'm not in I am a PMP, but I'm not in the project role. But as a director of digital marketing, I run a lot of projects. And there's digital transformation, and there's the adoption of new vendors or new applications or new strategies. And so I shared that in my situation, with the understanding I have a unique role, but also being able to learn and communicate and teach my stakeholders to accept, and then also to inspire my team to adopt and to learn and to change as well. And then also with the different stakeholders and the different teams that I have to collaborate with to initiate all of these or implement all of these tools is to be that trusted partner. And so one of the ways that I've seen the result of that is when I ask someone who reports to me to go and ask somebody on the enterprise data team to do something, and they say, I'm sorry, it's not our priority. But then I ask, and they get back to me within 4 hours, and it's done. And that just kind of shows to me that I've created that influential, trusted partner relationship where I'm able to really get the work done and to continue to build trust.
I'll add to that. I'm Bethany. Hi. So I think one thing that was interesting is we all kind of touched on within our group that as a project manager, even though you may not be like the supervisor of the person directly, you have that influence on them to inspire them and for them to want to have buy-in into your project.
Beautifully done. Notice the words that were coming up there, inspire, right? You're watching the reactions of people. You can tell if you've inspired people to do something based on how they respond to you. And you're right. Oftentimes, as a project manager, no one reports to you from a hierarchy perspective. So talk about the power of influence, right? You want to get people, if you want to know if you're really influencing, watch to see the outcome of your work when no one reports to you. Right, that's when you really know. So yeah, nice job. Yeah, great. Over here, group 5.
I think that we had the same thoughts as everybody else's. You know, as a project manager, even if you talk about one, you're hitting multiple as you go through the process. We had a lot of really great listeners in our team, whether it was listening to SMEs to know the best way to share knowledge and make the project a success, or listening to your stakeholders and understanding that they have personal lives as well, and you might need to, you know, give them a little bit of leeway or slack to make sure that they're not feeling overwhelmed, or listening to your students or your colleagues and understanding what they need and what they want to achieve and what the goal of the project is, and working your way through that. So, you know, listening goes into being that trusted partner, you know, communicating with intention, inspiring, learning, all of the things comes out of listening. So I think that was a really big thing that came out of our group.
Great. I love how you said we have a group of good listeners over here. Yeah, beautifully done. Yeah, that listening plays out everywhere. All the roles and paying attention to the needs. Sometimes it's what people say, sometimes it's what they're not saying, right? All right, our final group. Let's give them a round of applause for going final group. All right.
Hello, my name is Marisol Jones. I am actually being frustrated in being influential. So I was trying to pick their brain about what has been successful to them. In my current role, I have many projects, many stakeholders, and so my stakeholders, they want to live in their silos. So they don't want to go across silos. They want to be told what is their part and be left alone for anything else. So finding that communication and right-sizing it to the individual while at the same time keeping the full project or the full portfolio of projects moving towards success has been a little bit of a struggle, is finding that balance of giving overall information and individual care to become that trusted partner, because they don't want to know it all. So yeah, that was kind of what we spent most of the time trying to figure out.
Yeah, I love that you all use that time to just kind of say, look, I'm struggling with some of this. So what have you tried? Yeah, exactly, beautifully done. I was actually on site working with a client this past week that is trying to break down silos. And it was one of the key objectives of the 3 days that we were spending together was to break down silos. And part of it was understanding the needs. What was the need, and why were they entrenched in their silos? There had to be something that keeps them holding on to it. So we were spending time actually doing some activities to see them understand the benefits of working together and how it will accelerate growth for everyone by them doing that. We actually did an activity, you'll find this interesting, the final activity that we did. I had them doing activities. They knew in the room they were doing this, but they hadn't processed through the implications of it. I put 2 groups working the same issue on different sides of the room and did that all the way down the room. So it was duplicated on both sides. They knew it, and I just told them, I said, you just pick whichever one you want to go to. And so they did. People went off, and you had 2 groups working the same issues. And then about halfway through, I said, okay, now the 2 groups that were working the same issue come together and look to see what was the same and what was different to come up with a consolidated way of doing it. And what was interesting was watching the behaviors. At the very beginning of the activity, when I had two of the groups working the same issue, one of the individuals tried to go to the other table to see what they were doing, and that table was like, you need to get back to your table. Like, we're working this one on our side. And I was like, you see how tightly we hold on to things like that quickly? I was like, so it was interesting. Once we did the sharing where they broke down and they figured out the similarities between the two, then separate from the larger issue, I was able to have the conversation about the silos. I'm like, look how much more you gained in your analysis because you put everything together. Now transfer it back, and it's the same, right? It's the same. Well, thank you so much. You can tell there's a lot of expertise in the room, so I wanted to make sure that you took time to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to any questions you might have for me before we wrap up.
Let's very great content, Dr. Latten, but I'm sure there's some people in the room that may have a question or two. So if you do, please raise your hand. We do want to have some active participation, so don't be shy.
And it can be comments or reflections too. That's perfectly fine.
So we kind of talked about this both in our group and you just now about silos and breaking them down and why they're important to break down. I had a former job and it was very siloed. There was some toxicity, but it was very siloed and people didn't want those silos broken down.
Yes.
Do you have any advice or any tips or tricks on how to convince people that, hey, we do need to work together, we do need to come together, have some cooperation here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and typically when I see the silos, and I think it would make it better if they weren't working in that way, I have to make sure, do the senior leaders who are holding them accountable see a problem? I may see the problem, right? I may look at it and go, wow, if they would collaborate a little bit more, then they could move faster or better or more efficiently. But if the senior leaders don't see that and they're not being held accountable in a way structurally that holds them, to not operating in silos, then it's hard to create the traction, right? So if I see opportunities for them to partner together, and I really think it's detrimental, that final one that was a trusted partner, if I have the right relationship with the senior leader, then that's where my trust with that senior leader comes in, because I'm not going to affect it at this level. I've got to go to the top, and I've got to do it in a way that's not undermining the work that's happening. So that's when I would go into the top, and I'm a little bit delicate on how to do that. Like, I'm noticing, these two groups are operating this way, and I wonder if we had them work together in this way, if it might help you accomplish the goal a little bit differently or a little faster. So you kind of have to look at who has the power in that situation, right? And yeah, the silo has to come from that level. Does that help? Yeah, I saw a lot of head. Now you're like, oh yeah. Great question. Yes.
So I guess piggybacking off of that question, I know one of the things you had mentioned, and there was people that don't information share, and how you like to share as much information as possible, yes. And I'm kind of the same way. Do you think a lot of times the siloing comes from people that fear that they'll lose some type of power base?
Absolutely.
if they share information across?
I do. I think that's a lot of fear-based behavior when we see people not sharing information. That's why that activity that I did with the group this week actually called attention to the table that told the guy to go away. I was like, oh, look how protective you got over that process, right? But yeah, I think you're right. A lot of times when you see organizations and individuals who don't share the information readily, they're trying to protect their job, right? Which means they've got to understand whether their job is secure in some other way, right? So, but yeah, I agree. I think it's concern, fear for job. I think especially as a consultant, that's why I see a lot of consultants who don't share information and share like I believe in creating capability in organizations. So a lot of people will not help create the capability in groups. They want to just make sure they're the ones capable. I just believe that in time it all circles back. Like the opportunities will continue to happen if you are willing to give away freely, and for leaders and companies when they do that. I think it shows in the culture. Yeah. It does. It builds trust. Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Hey, you talked about in meetings noticing facial expressions and
Yes.
addressing it. So in a world where everyone's remote and sometimes people don't turn on their cameras, any suggestions for that scenario?
Yeah, it's a great question. By the way, I've worked remotely now for almost 25 years, which means I was working remotely in dial-up. I actually helped to create the first virtual remote guidelines for what's now Wells Fargo, so it goes way, way back. So you're right, in situations where there are certain, because a lot of people will not come on camera, I am sensitive to when I need people on camera and not. If I know that there is an agenda topic coming up and it could have some reaction and I need to be able to see faces, then I may intentionally say, hey, I know we're getting ready to get into some topics that may be a little uncomfortable, or, and I'd love to be able to see faces if you can. Turn on your cameras, right? That's not something I impose unless I feel like we really need to. But a lot of times as project managers, when we're putting together agendas, we have a pretty good pulse on what things are going to be a little sticky and what things are not. So yes, I'll gently ask it. And most times, when people actually do respond. They're like, oh yeah, no problem. Or they're like, oh, I wasn't ready to come on camera today. It's okay. It's okay. But yeah, so does that help with the technique? Yeah, I try to tailor it to the topic that may be coming up. Yeah, and it's not always appropriate, by the way, if you see a reaction to somebody, especially like a nice thing about project management, you get to know the players, right? And you get to know who will like, wow, on you, and you're like, whoa, that went downhill really fast. So there are times that I may notice something, and I'll intentionally comment, and then there are times that I'm not going to do it in that group setting because it could derail, or someone could perceive it as me trying to call them out or embarrass them. But the fact I notice it, and if that means I need to go back and have a one-on-one with them, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. I noticed, you looked a little frustrated in that conversation, and just wanted to make sure, is there something else we need to talk about, that kind of thing. So, yeah, good question. I think I saw one more hand.
Any other questions? All right, Curtis has one.
So my question is about managing up, and this one is extremely personal. So like I said, I've grown very fast in my company, and what I found kind of what everyone else hit on is that it can be threatening to a lot of people. So in those types of situations, how have you in the past navigated those experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question in terms of managing up and also paying attention to how peers are doing things. One of the first things I do if I'm moving through roles pretty quickly, or people perceive that I'm being viewed by certain leaders in a different way, I make sure I'm pretty transparent with that leader about, hey, when we're in this setting, I want to make sure my peer group, sees me as being one of them. So I need your help, right? I need to make sure that when we're in meetings that you also are soliciting feedback from others. I love the conversations that we have, but I would need to make sure everybody feels included. So that's a way that I've managed up before, is to just have that authentic conversation. Because I do see that happen very easily. A leader gets real comfortable with someone, they trust them, and all of a sudden that's who they're calling on. They're, oh, Sherry, what do you think about this? Oh, Sherry, what? And it's like, stop the, oh, Sherry. Right, you're like, ooh, because you can just feel the room like, there you go again, right? So yeah, that's when I'm having a private conversation with that leader to say, look, I want to be of support, but I also want to make sure we're not alienating other people in the room, is one technique. But I'm happy to talk to you a little bit more about specifics you might be experiencing too. Okay. Great. Other questions?
We have one at the very back.
Yeah. I did.
What are your tips for, the best practices for conflict resolution when you're dealing with difficult people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So tips when I'm dealing with difficult people. First, I really try to understand where people are coming from. Like, what's their why? Like, what's their motivation for why they're being difficult? Sometimes it's fear. We were talking earlier about fear. Sometimes people are being difficult because they're fearful. Sometimes they're threatened, right? Sometimes they're concerned about how others will perceive them in a room. They could be scared about their job. They could just be frustrated kind of people. They could be going through things personally. So when I'm experiencing someone who's really difficult, especially someone I'm going to have a repeat interaction with, then I'm taking the time to understand what I think that's about. As a matter of fact, one of my closest friends today was someone that had a huge toxic situation in the office. Was being really snippy with people, and just unleashed on me one day. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what just happened here? In that situation, I was like, can we go to a conference room so that we can have a conversation? I want to understand a little bit more about what's happening. So I try to, when I'm dealing with difficult people, try to make sure I don't give them a platform to do it like in a big setting. So I try to give them that space to check in one-on-one with people. Is probably one of the biggest things. What's behind it? Because that may have nothing to do with work, right? They could be fatigued, tired from home life. They could have a lot of things going on. And that's why it typically takes some one-on-one time if I see someone doing a lot of flaring up in meetings. Then I develop that trust with them. And what will tend to happen is they may be flaring up in other meetings, but by the time they realize I'm here with them, they typically have calmed down a little bit in the meetings. Or I have learned how to navigate them a little differently with the group. Yeah. Does that help? Good, great. All right, good.
All right, let's give Ms. Dr. Latten a round of applause for some very
Thank you so
inspiring
much.
words.
I appreciate it. Thank you.